Now, this week, the federal government unveiled plans to expand the capacity of the Snowy Mountains hydro scheme. It follows an announcement by the South Australian government that they will invest $500 million into a gas-fired electricity station and battery storage.
Both moves are an attempt to secure energy supply after the energy market operator warned that there could be widespread outages if, in the years to come, there are no changes to the nation's current power supplies. Let's get more on this. We're joined by Dylan McConnell, researcher at the Climate and Energy College at the University of Melbourne. Dylan, thanks for joining us.
No worries, Andrew. Good morning.
How would you sum up Australia's current energy capacity and distribution system?
Well, at the moment we have a fairly aged generation system. It's a large proportion of it is coming to the end of its technical life. We have plants around the country that are, approaching 50 years and I guess getting close to closing down.
As in coal power stations, for instance?
And also gas. Particularly in the case of South Australia, there's the Torrens Island plant. That's, it's two units that are, or two separate plants that are a combined capacity of about 1,280 megawatts, and that is almost 50 years old.
In your view, then, has there been a distinct lack of planning, certainly on a national scale, to take account of those power stations that will have to be decommissioned?
Yeah, to some extent. I would say that I guess it's more about policy uncertainty. We have had very much a market-based scheme for the last 20 years, and what we've seen this sort of week has been a fairly, unprecedented intervention from both levels of government, where we are actually seeing, a move away from that market-based approach.
Does it concern you, though, given your research, that it appears to be fairly ad hoc and there is no clear policy on a national level? I mean, we saw that very heated exchange between the South Australian Premier and the Energy Minister, Josh Frydenberg, there earlier this week, perhaps indicative of the lack of coordination between state and federal authorities.
Yeah, look, I mean, that is a very clear case of a lack of coordination, and we even see that with the announcement around the Snowy Hydro plant, actually. The two largest shareholders are New South Wales and Victoria, and as far as I'm aware, they were not consulted on this rather dramatic expansion. So there is clearly a bit of a breakdown in communication, or a lack of cohesion across the different jurisdictions.
Yeah, just on that plan to expand the Snowy Mountains hydro scheme. So in your view, it's certainly not clear who would pay for it, although the federal government, I think, has indicated if New South Wales and Victoria don't come to the party, they will pick up the tab. But there's also a question of how long it would take to come online.
Yeah, that's right. And look, there's a range of estimates around, how long it might take. I've seen from as short as 4 years to as long as 7 years, but that's there's not a lot of details around this plan at the moment, so it's really hard to, speculate on when or how big or how long that might take.
And in your view, to expand the capacity by 50%, I think they're talking about that would supply enough power to supply roughly 500,000 homes. Is that actually make economic sense?
Well, I guess it's important to say that this is not actually about increasing supply. This is about energy storage. In fact, this is about basically providing peak capacity in those extreme heat, or when everyone has their air conditioning running in those days in summer. So in terms of providing additional energy, it doesn't actually provide additional energy. It'll be basically shifting it around between different hours of the day.
Well, and I guess that's what the South Australian government is trying to address with their plans for battery storage.
Yes, that's right. In the case of South Australia, I wouldn't say that their plan is particularly ad hoc. I think this has been in development for quite some time, and at least that plan did not come as a shock as much as the Snowy Hydro announcement. There has been quite a bit of work in that space, I think, in South Australia for some months now.
A lot of fingers are pointed at the regulation of the electricity market and how that is leading to failures. Even some suggestions that it could be renationalised, or at least that the federal government take control. Have you managed to take a look at that and see which, what would perhaps be the most efficient way forward?
Yeah, look, I have noticed that. I heard Joel Fitzgibbon this morning actually calling for, a national single approach to energy policy. Now, in theory, that is good, but it doesn't particularly work if the national interests aren't aligned with state interests. And as we can see, that has not really been the case with the South Australian and federal situation at the moment. So in theory, yes, it would be good if there was, a nationally consistent framework. In fact, there is supposed to be. We have a body called the COAG Energy Council, which is effectively supposed to be in charge of policy development and the entire framework of the national electricity market. But as we can see, that is not particularly functioning very well at the moment.
So you're actually pointing the finger at COAG, so there's a failure there.
Absolutely, yes. This is a clear failure of that process.
So what do they need to do then? When you say there are perhaps not common interests between the federal government and the states, why is there not?
I guess the biggest point of difference is around climate policy, without a doubt, and I think that's evidence between this sort of acrimonious debate that we've had between the federal government and the South Australian government over the last 6 months. And we see in the South Australian plan, they are not walking away from renewable energy in any sense. They are very much, expanding, looking to, manage their renewable energy generation, and we're not seeing the same thing, and we don't even really have a national policy around what is going to happen to our ageing infrastructure in the power sector.
Yeah, so you're saying really policymakers are struggling to come up with a plan for the future, taking a look at whether renewables are sustainable, not just in the long term, but obviously also in the short term.
Sorry, ask that again.
Well, just as far as coming up with policy both at the federal and state level, those policymakers are really struggling at the moment to work in renewables and to see how sustainable they could be. Obviously, people are saying it's going to be more sustainable in the long term, but it's more a short-term problem at this point. Yeah,
absolutely, it's a short-term problem, and that's why we're seeing that this fairly significant intervention in South Australia. This is all about the next few years. This is not a long-term vision. I mean, they're putting in this $250 million gas-fired open-cycle gas turbine, which is a peak turbine. It exists to provide peak capacity. It's going to be a backstop, I think, in the words of the Minister, Koutsantonis. It's not there to participate in the market, but to provide, reliable supply for his constituents. Now, I guess it's worth pointing out there are lots of ways to do this in the long term. One particular relevant for the South Australian system is concentrating solar thermal. There is a very active discussion around concentrating solar thermal in the upper Spencer Gulf. There's also pumped hydro. And in the short term, also battery storage. So there are a lot of options for managing this issue. It's just about a matter of, timeframes and getting it done.
Yeah, well, no doubt it's keeping you busy as well. Dylan McConnell from the Climate